your preferred partner for custom software development and technology outsourcing. We offer state-of-the-art customized software development services that are client-centric, flexible, and secure to empower businesses.
Mallie, tell us who you are and what you really do. Let's start there.
Okay. Global Practice Director overseeing large global business customers sales segment within AT&T from an IoT go-to-market execution perspective. So work with our largest customers to advance their digital initiatives, transformation typically, around IoT, whether it's a connected product or whether that is really transforming the oil field or their manufacturing or supply chain. So I've been with the group since the early days of Mike Triano when it was a startup back in 2016. So it'll be my 15th year at AT&T doing this. I was hired really from a global consulting firm to start in this group, and it's been a wild ride.
I can be disappointed with this answer, but are we the first show you did for IoT?
I think we are.
I think.
Yeah, we did that. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I went to dinner with you, with Nikki.
With Nikki and
James.
Yes,
that's right. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, see how far back we go?
Mm-hmm.
And nothing's changed. That's the good news. I mean, everything's exactly. Oh, wait a minute.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we're on the next gen side of the equation on FirstNet, and
yes.
And you want to explain what the spectrum is first, or how do you want to start this?
Well, I mean, I'll start off with just laying the foundational aspects of why, this FirstNet is being utilized in an IoT context first and foremost, right? And it's accelerated our 5G rollout from that perspective. So with the government's award of a 25-year contract for us to build out that first responder network to allow the agencies, whether it's the Department of Defense or whether it's Homeland Security or the local police department, all those agencies now have a unified network to communicate on, and that's what the federal government was awarding. And that was something that we really worked hard to really secure, because we knew that would really help us overall strategically as a company. And I'll explain a little bit why that is. Number one, AT&T was a big city carrier, not necessarily focusing in the rural areas. Verizon had bought Alltel, and that gave them a dominance in the central Midwest and other regions like that. And so I think AT&T was satisfied for a long time of being the number one iPhone carrier in the big city markets for premium customers. But that business model obviously needed to be supplemented, and so that's why we went after FirstNet. And we thought, hey, we're the original Ma Bell, 140-year-old company. It makes sense, and we were able to persuade the government that with the network resources that we had, we could really protect their first responders, the NSA, the CIA, and the like, all to be on this network. So they gave us a lot of spectrum, beachfront property, if you will, in the spectrum world, and we have exclusive band just for the first responders. But if you are Whirlpool, you're considered part of the critical manufacturing of the United States. You're qualified as an extended company to go on there. If you are Chevron and you have your own fire department to put out your own gas, then you can get on FirstNet. So even Waste Management, the trash company, is on FirstNet as an example. So, there's several million subscribers now on it, mainly, obviously, primarily first responders. Those guys are prioritized at the very top of the stack from that perspective. But from an IoT perspective, we are really allowed to continue to serve companies that are proven to be eligible by the eligibility board to be on it. And so that then allows us to support both enterprise and first responders with a single physically isolated network with great spectrum capabilities that also complements our regular macro network. So it's been a successful venture. We have to report to Congress every 90 days how we're doing that build out. So in rural North Dakota, or the Permian Basin in Texas, where we were not really, from a business model, trying to support that from a coverage perspective, now we have to. We have to provide county-to-county coverage for every state in the union. And we're about 95% through that build-out. So really, we're spending Billions of dollars. In fact, we're the largest capital investor in the United States over the last 5 years. We've invested $105 billion. And part of that was the $25 billion the government gave us to help build out the network, so we were touching the towers FirstNet and doing 5G at the same time. So it allowed us to really take advantage of that situation, to not have to touch the towers twice for two different things. And so that's now kind of changed the landscape of the way AT&T serves the United States from a coverage perspective. And there's even, the FCC's approved technology to allow that capability to even be extended range-wise, like with a Sierra wireless device. So they approved extra wattage capability, power gain, so that the Texas State Patrol, which is operating right now doing drug interdiction, can be in the very hinterlands of Texas and still receive a signal, whereas before they could not, from anybody.
Right.
So it's been a boon for us, both for downstream recipients like enterprise customers, helps us, for mission-critical IoT deployments where that data is unthrottled and it's physically isolated, separate core network. So it's protected in a way that there is no other network like that protected from a mobile carrier perspective. So it's been very much a very positive, advancing thing for AT&T overall to deploy FirstNet and get that award.
Excellent. Now, I've got to parse you out on a lot of this. So let's start with the basics. Okay. This is a network that's not to do with the 911 network, which you, by the way, you run a national 911 network and you do a very good job. So thank you for that. And just for the audience's knowledge, I used to run the 911 network in New Jersey, so I have some experience here.
Right.
So the thing that I'm want to get through is on the first responders. It's after that 911 call. It's the connectivity to the people who are doing or the fire department, the ambulance.
That's right. All those people are primary with preemption. So if anybody else is, number one, they have their own separate frequency band, band 14 as they call it. So most iPhones, a lot of devices, Samsungs, all have that frequency band now included in the chipset of it, right? And so they get to access that exclusively for them, but then also use all the other frequency bands as well. And then they are prioritized, so the network sees a call when they got the 911 and the fire department is going out, or let's say it's the Chevron had an oil spill, right?
Yep.
And those employees are able to access the tower in a prioritized manner, in an unthrottled data manner as well.
Okay. So I know in the store, if I just go to the store, they offer me to be on FirstNet as a discount as a consumer, but I can get kicked off because of the high priority functionality.
That's correct. That's correct.
So, but the devices that the policemen, the fire department, everybody else are using, they can be their iPhones, but they're also specialized devices too. You want to talk about some of those?
Yeah, so basically the SIM, when whether you take an iPhone or Samsung or whatever the device may be, or maybe a specialized Motorola phone that they may use, the SIM itself is really the identifier that that user is a FirstNet user. And there's literally 11 levels of prioritization capabilities, okay? So, and the FirstNet Authority assigns and grants based upon the use cases or what that firm does, whether it's government or enterprise, to determine their level of priority. There's a FirstNet Federal Authority that oversees that, grants those approvals, and that gets created as a profile and then loaded on their particular SIM. So they could have bought a phone 2 years ago that had band 14 on it, then become a FirstNet, as an employee even on a BYOD device, they can have that phone programmed, right? So the fact that when they're making their call, they're prioritized above others.
So it's in the SIM management function that first gets.
That's right. The SIM is speaking to the
Cisco Control Center interface that you guys built custom.
Right. So the SIM speaks to the tower speaks to the HLR, and the HLR has the database to say, oh, this particular user that we just authenticated has this type of capability on the network. And by the way, their particular data gets routed a certain way onto that physically separated, isolated network from this traditional core mobile user that's using the consumer network.
Okay, so just to be clear, the prioritization happens regardless, right? I don't know whether the network doesn't know whether there's a fire or not. It just knows that the guys who are in charge of the fire.
You're already enabled priority.
Right. So we assume you've got issues going on if you're using the phone and connecting to other people using the phone.
Right.
Okay. Let's talk about the devices. Are there there's a specialized website that's got the...
Yeah, there's a complete list from IoT type devices to regular phones to specialized, and it's being updated on a continuous basis, right? It's not a static document. It's really rapidly evolving as more and more manufacturers are really registering and getting approval for their devices to be certified from a Band 14 perspective. I mean, one of our customers, was working with Samsung recently. They wanted a ruggedized type Samsung tablet for their enterprise use case, and that didn't exist. And so Samsung really just basically paid to get that certified so that that particular FirstNet user could use those new versions of this ruggedized Samsung tablet to be on Band 14 and access from that perspective. So it's something that we see that the big manufacturers, all from Sierra Wireless, right, Cradlepoint, they're all really, it's a new opportunity for them as these police departments and everybody have to refresh, and 3G is driving a lot of that, right? So, part of what's happening is if you're turning down 3G next year and you want to you're going to have to touch that device anyway, then upgrading it for FirstNet makes sense if you're eligible.
So let's talk about kind of devices other than your phone, because everybody's got a phone.
Yeah.
But we've got the police cars with the gateways going in.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
So many of the state patrols now have already switched over onto FirstNet and are using traditionally Sierra Wireless modems. A lot of the state patrols have used Sierra Wireless as an example in those backs of those trunks. Cisco is another one as an example.
Cradlepoint. Sarah, Multitech.
Multitech as well. Yeah, all the traditional.
We've got
Digi. Every one of these guys that have been in the ecosystem have allowed this. When they're all getting the chipsets that have the Band 14 capability in it, and then just getting their devices certified.
So, are we nationwide already? Are we fully deployed?
95% of the build out that we committed to Congress is already out. So this means that there's been a very significant sea change in the coverage capabilities that we have, right? From that perspective. Now, if you're Band 14, you're even able to get further coverage. It's about 700 megahertz spectrum capability, and that normally is obviously something that's transmits much further over rural areas than traditional 1900 or 850.
I wanted to look to see if we've even got smart watches that are prioritized, which evidently I could use one. What about LMR interfaces? Do we have any of that yet?
Absolutely. So LMR is absolutely part of it. Motorola has been very front and center on the LMR and the capabilities to integrate to the traditional systems.
We've got to backtrack a little, and I apologize. I'm the one who brought the acronym in, so it's my fault.
Yeah, go ahead.
Land mobile radio is de facto what a lot of police use. It's been a separate band. Motorola has been king of building those things.
Right. So police needed their own dedicated radio networks and capabilities that Motorola really supported over the years. And there's not a need to go rip all that out, but rather just complement that capability by bridging that network in with FirstNet. So what we want to do is just enhance the LMR capability. Ultimately, they may not need that because they have their own, but there's dependencies, and as we do the fill-in coverage, there's the Venn diagram, the two kind of overlap a little bit, right? But ultimately, over time, there'll be maybe less need for LMR as much from that perspective, as things are done maybe more in a digital versus the traditional analog radio, 900 megahertz trunking and things of that nature that was done by fire and police.
Right. The interesting thing, and I'm going to get in trouble here, so we'll edit it out if we don't want management to know.
Yeah.
Okay? The very first search when you do FirstNet
Yeah.
is Verizon talking about touching FirstNet. Are they doing dual SIM with you, or how are they managing that?
Is Verizon doing dual SIM, or is the police department's doing dual SIM?
Police department's doing dual SIM.
Yeah, so I say there are instances of dual SIM from that perspective. So FirstNet, the government said, hey, I'm only going to award one carrier to create one network, right? Verizon has been working with a number of these agencies through the years, especially because they had, like I talked about,
Right.
they bought Alltel
Different
and had that
footprint.
rural coverage advantage. So there is really a transitioning that has been going on where I didn't use AT&T because they didn't have coverage here in southwest Kansas, but now we do because of first responders, right? And we have the ability to really control, manage, and separate that network. Because it's physically separated versus anybody else that's providing kind of a prioritization is really a software-defined network capability. It's not a physically isolated core. So that's what separates FirstNet. It is a physical isolated core away from everything else, whereas Verizon and anybody else that's offering those types of services really are doing it through software.
Right.
From that perspective. So there is only one federal government-approved network for first responders. That's it. Other carriers have the ability to provide capabilities that does provide some prioritization
right.
From that perspective. But we've been rather successful in, once we explain the architecture, the protection, the way we're beholden to Congress every 90 days to report out to the FirstNet Authority. That's a different business model game than the traditional consumer wireless carrier that's isolating part of their traffic just for certain types of customers.
So let's walk through some of the use cases. Have we had an interesting experience so far with FirstNet that is warranting a talk?
Well, I think that, the hurricane had occurred. It came on shore in Louisiana, went through Lake Charles is a recent example, right, of everything was down for the most part very quickly in the Lake Charles area. We have these deployed assets, both drone, balloon, and cows, the traditional cow that everybody has. But there's a whole fleet of that on standby.
Explain COW before.
Cellular on wheels.
Yeah,
cellular
thank
on
you.
wheels, right?
Thank
Because of the FirstNet, the commitment to the federal authority is the fact that if you're notified there's a hurricane coming, class, level 3,
right.
then you are already staged with this fleet of drones, trucks, everything. So the fact that as soon as it hits, then everything gets turned back up very quickly, even if it's on a temporary basis, whether it's the drones that are holding up, cellular coverage up in the air, specialized satellite capabilities. All that is really like a SWAT team that comes into a disaster area. So, so the recent event proved out that really within a matter of 1.5 hours, any service disruption was restored.
Wow.
So, and that's unprecedented, right? There's never been in the history of the United States where that type of storm comes through, then you have uptime. You normally have kind of some towers working, some towers not, right? But the immediately pre-deployed assets, and then as soon as the storm hits and knocks out the towers, they're automatically lighted up. That's really kind of the value to ensure the integrity of the national infrastructure and security for first responders that we are committed to delivering already in order to win that contract.
Does it home to the regular tandems, or does it home into its own private packet core at that point?
Its own packet core.
Its own packet core.
Yep. And then, let's say you have a big event, different authorities have even the ability to prioritize different users and different use cases, IoT-wise, like they may be running mobile data from a command center perspective, and they want that prioritized. So there's even control given from a login console from that perspective. So, so even enterprise customers, who have been given, primary capabilities because they have their own fire departments, because they have a big chemical plant and things of that nature, are allowed to access the FirstNet network and change those ratings of their users in real time for prioritization. And uplift is what they call uplift.
Right, okay. So do we have examples of Chevron or somebody like that taking advantage of it right now? You've mentioned Chevron several times. Are they?
Yep, just because Chevron is approved as an example. So, but I wouldn't say that's too new probably for them to be used in a disaster retelling of a story.
We're not looking for them to.
Yeah.
We don't want to say, oh, and this company had a disaster.
I'm using that as a placeholder because you're right. They're publicly traded. We're publicly traded, and I could talk about them. They're a customer.
Yeah, no. Steve gave us an example of how to restrict our speaking to match the needs.
Exactly.
But let's talk about.
I would say that, but to answer your question, I don't think I know of off the top of my head of any enterprise customer that went in and had to do an uplift on their capability. But to be fair, that's on the data side, IoT, that I have purview. I know for a fact that in that Lake Charles situation, Waste Management had to go in and clean up in order to get the debris out of the way, for the roads to be cleared. They were called in. They're part of the first response team. First Management has a contract to do so. And so they were able to suddenly go to stores, get FirstNet-capable phones, be turned on, and then respond to that event on demand.
Okay.
Some of these users did not have the phones, and it was just one of the things that we made available through the store outlets of them intersecting, getting phones that are capable, being then on FirstNet, then getting the things and coordinating with their crews.
Okay, so the IoT-ish part of FirstNet is mostly the police car interface, right? Where we're connecting up all the different
SCADA
elements.
systems monitoring is probably a big one. So if you're assigned by the federal authority as extended primary, as part of the critical infrastructure of the United States, and you're a utility, you're an oil and gas company, you're approved as an extended primary typically be part of. In fact, a lot of these companies were pre-approved by the FirstNet Authority. And so to make it easier for them to access that network. And so if you're approved, then you're allowed immediately, right, to register with the federal authority and have access, and your data devices then are prioritized on the network, SCADA system-wise.
So that brings up a very interesting question.
Sure.
Because I'm sitting here and I'm originally from New Jersey, and every inch of land in New Jersey is incorporated into either a municipality or a town.
Yep.
I'm now in Florida. I get to tell people I live in Boca, but if I call the city of Boca, they say, we don't know you from Adam. Okay? So I've got...
But you have a couple speeding tickets.
Yeah, well, that's a different issue.
Yeah.
But the authority having jurisdiction is quite numerous in this country, right?
That's correct.
The utility companies, after the big cities on the coast, you get, places that are like, 5 or 6 counties maybe when very sparse.
Yes.
So how are you guys managing the channel for supporting these kind of folks? Is this all online? Is this bars, system integrators?
So we have 3.5 million customers just in general, and a lot of those are mom and pop utility companies and co-ops and things of that nature. There's account teams assigned to every one of those. That's why we have the largest sales force in the United States from a carrier perspective, right? There's literally thousands of them. And so we have that divided up in sales segments for government, right? Business, small business, and the like. So I'll tell you that the number one thing, if you're an account team and you have a utility, even if it's a small utility, you're having a discussion with that utility about the advantages of FirstNet. So we've literally within the last 36 months have added, millions of subscribers to that network, and all of them are electric co-ops, police and fire, things of that nature. So it's really the account teams educating at the local field level that capability. And there's regional FirstNet authority people all populated, all around regions of the United States. And so they support the account teams and they help educate the utilities on what this capability is. Now, obviously, we've published this in the press, and when utilities have a conference, or all the firemen have the conference in in New Orleans like they do every year, right? We're there, obviously broadcasting this capability, and these guys all talk to each other as well. So there's a good word of mouth, and the experience has been great. So we're busy as Santa's little elves, quite frankly, just trying to turn everybody up from that perspective. So it's been a very good thing for AT&T strategically to have won that. And then ultimately our IoT customers, or to even enterprise, have the ability now to not, I had an old company tell me recently that their modems on their SCADA system was near a high school in a rural part of Dakotas. And at 2:30, their modems would start to flake out because 1,200 students came out of the school doors and all got on their phone. And then they're competing with that one tower that's in the area. It's in a rural area. So that one tower is being overloaded. A 4G LTE tower can handle only 1,000 simultaneous voice and data channel transactions. Right. And so by getting onto FirstNet, they were then prioritized and they were no longer knocked off the tower by somebody doing their social media when they're coming out of school. So that's the kind of things that are happening, and that spreads kind of the good news from the adoption in the rural areas about that. So
this is, in effect, solves the social network problem of everybody. When a crisis happens, right?
Yes, that's right. The networks get jammed, right?
Yeah.
They're oversubscribed, and that's always been an issue for carriers to manage to deliver value to the shareholders and also have availability to the consumer. It's always been a balancing act, but from a FirstNet perspective, we have to provide an unthrottled, high availability network to the degree that never had to be done before in the United States.
So besides SCADA, let's walk through some of the lone worker.
Lone worker, yep. Video is a sensor. So if the worker is taking their hard hat off, as an example, right, and they're in a dangerous area, then the video as a sensor can respond very quickly, right, to let somebody know. And we can do that kind of in a local route traffic with MEC, so that the latency is very low because we can prioritize that traffic and route it off low as well, off in the network locally. So there's some nice things that we're doing now by which to improve IoT use cases, integrating it with the FirstNet capabilities the network has.
In disaster recovery strategies, there's disasters that require you to basically evacuate people. There are disasters that require you to gather people.
That's correct.
And the first thing you do is you build your control center. Is that priority already established?
Already established.
It's dynamic in the...
Yeah.
Okay.
They are, so if you're the police department, your SIMs are already coded with that priority. Then, from a administration perspective, you have the ability to uplift a certain subgroup to even prioritize them over those users. Let's say that you have 100 people involved in a scene, right? They're all prioritized over the consumer traffic, okay? And then the administrator for that police department or the fire department, whatever the case may be, has the ability to uplift, whether it's data application, on those modems, or whether it's their handsets, to be prioritized above everybody else, because they're the mission critical responders that you want as well to be prioritized.
Right. Now, when COVID hit, we ended up with hospitals having to basically build augmented places. And I know you and Cradlepoint partnered to do extended, basically making it so that the hospital systems were available in that. I don't know, was that part of FirstNet or was that separate?
No, it was part of FirstNet.
Okay, it was part of FirstNet.
Yep.
Okay.
So because we already, all over the United States, we have these pre-deployed assets to to quickly turn things up. That's what we've had to become good at from a natural disaster area. So it was able to, from the health crisis perspective, we were able to support FEMA and the hospitals when they were setting up those extended hospital capabilities. Because part of the tower that was engineered for the number of users in an area wasn't engineered for a crisis like COVID, where everybody's concentrated. That tower could never have handled it, so we had to immediately deploy quickly to allow people to have access to additional channels, in addition to the tower they were already communicating to.
Okay, and while we're on the subject of this, all these emergency stations we've built for people testing and that kind of stuff, is that just, I don't think they're priorities. I'm trying to figure out whether they have any connectivity associated with them or not. I've stumped the band, I think.
Well, yes. I want you to restate the question when you say test equipment.
The testing sites for the COVID. Like my neighborhood, I've now got.
All right. So a lot of the testing sites were run by FEMA.
Okay.
Right? They were overseen as authority as part of the emergency crisis. And so, you would have local authorities, you have FEMA authorities, right? Like in Atlanta, where we had it at the Delta Museum, that was the National Guard also deployed there. Every single one of them had FirstNet priority access in there, right? The tower that's supporting the Atlanta airport in that particular area, right, obviously was not where thousands of people were driving their cars into the Delta Museum parking lot to get vaccinated, me included, from that perspective. And so that tower was never engineered by the RAN engineering team normally to do that. So we set up additional capabilities to support that. And all I'm saying is that we have a rapid response team from that perspective that we're already committed contractually to the federal government to do. This is something that we said, this is what we have, and the government says you have to have this capability. And we get spot checked on that, if you will, right?
Right. Okay. So what's been the most amazing thing to you about doing this? Where do you see
Well, I think it's been transformative. The amazing thing to me is that from an AT&T person who's been with the company for over the last 15 years, and really through the IoT lens, right, is just how it's been transformative in our capabilities from a network perspective, right? So this is the biggest boon for me. I mean, I wish only 15 years ago when I started, we had this capability, right? When I started Singular Wireless, right?
Right.
And where, you're along interstate highways and much fall beyond that, it got shallow pretty quick. So I feel like from that perspective, the amazing thing from a business person's perspective is just the availability to serve customers in a greater fashion than I ever could before, right? I think the other transformative fact is that when we won that contract, what we were able to do is take the $25 billion they gave us and then touch we had 75,000 towers, touch all those towers with the 5G capability at the same time. So we didn't, so from a corporation perspective, shareholder value perspective, we could take that capital and really kill two birds with one stone, turning up band 14, engineering those sites for first responders, things of that nature, but also at the same time upgrading the equipment so that it was easy for us via software to just turn 5G up as we created the backhaul to all those areas for 5G support.
And I hate to ask this because I don't know.
I hate for you to ask it too. Go ahead.
Okay. What part of 5G are we talking about? All threes?
All of them. Yeah.
So high availability.
Right.
Low latency, low
right.
power.
Yeah. So listen. The equipment has these capabilities, and the frequency bands are there to do so. The real pickle for everybody is how much fiber, how fast can I get fiber Ethernet to that tower, right? In the rural part of North Dakota, right? Where you are not the operating Bell company and you're relying upon the other carrier for the interconnect. So there's come long poles in the tent to enable 5 millimeter gigabit speeds wirelessly, right, from an infrastructure perspective. But we could at least put the radios up from Nokia and Ericsson on the tower that had this millimeter wave capability, have the regular mid-spectrum capability, right, from that perspective, and then do fill-ins with the microcells and things of that nature, right?
Right. So we're still obligated for the glass, though. So how do you do drones with glass? Where do the drones hone to at that point? I don't know the answer to that. I'm curious.
So when you're talking about in a disaster where we bring the drones in with the cellular capability where it holds up in the air, about 100 feet up in the air. So the drones are all with the staged fleet of first responding.
Okay.
So they exist with that. So it's satellite, it's drone, it's specialized balloons that also will hold up in the air so they can anchor and tether it, and then that provides the blanket coverage capabilities. So all those three things are really, when Puerto Rico happened, we used a lot of drone capabilities to support that, right? There were some pharmaceutical companies that needed to deliver critical medication for cancer patients in Puerto Rico, right? So we were able to deploy the drones to do that. We even used drones to deliver the medicine in Puerto Rico. After that, infrastructure really got wiped off the face of the planet for sure, because it was very fragile to begin with, right? It wasn't hardened infrastructure. So for a long time, for most of the year, we were deploying drones just really to help that situation there in Puerto Rico.
Neat. Are there questions from the audience before we close this up? Oh, I hate when they're quiet. You know that?
He has his hand raised right there.
Oh, go ahead. Come closer, because I'd love to see the face too.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Talking about bringing him on stage.
First of all, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
My question, a couple of parts to it, but the first question is are you just prioritizing traffic over existing towers, or does FirstNet have its own towers? So we have a situation where we have mobile units in areas like Missouri, where there is no signal whatsoever.
That's right.
And they have to transmit fairly large files for the prison services, and we have no capability to do that.
Right.
Does FirstNet cover areas like that as a separate tower?
I'll repeat the question, but we're going to get to a summary of the
Basically, the net of the question is in rural areas where there is currently no coverage whatsoever, right? Does band 14 in the 700 megahertz spectrum, along with, let's say, a Sierra wireless equipment that has what they call HPUE, which means it can grab a signal that's very weak from a long distance away, will the combination of those two solution elements serve the need? We normally, you can see me afterwards, we assign a FirstNet rep, they go look at your lat and longs to determine if the answer is yes. So we are now serving areas that never were served before with that first responder network bandwidth capability, along with equipment that now has a great ability to pick that up. Now, let's say that's still not good enough in that situation. So private cellular capabilities, everybody's coming out now with different private cellular capabilities.
Not CBRS, but private cellular.
Yeah, you can use CBRS. CBRS is just a spectrum band.
Right.
It's a shared spectrum band that people can use. But you wouldn't typically use CBRS in a high bandwidth data for prisons. So if it's high bandwidth, CBRS would not be a shared spectrum that you'd want. So you as a entity are allowed to go buy your own spectrum and then deploy it in your own private cellular if that's what you needed. You may not have the capital to do that. It can also then be offered as a service, right? And so we literally have greater extensibility with the FirstNet, and then we'll determine if we literally can get to that location through software. We look at those, what the range is. We can test with the equipment, like from Sierra Wireless, the HPU capability to grab that fringe signal in the rural area. And then if that doesn't exist, then the next place where companies go to is private cellular capabilities, which we now offer as a service.
So the Sierra Wireless is actually more like a stay right there, young man. Ron? Stay right there.
Oh, no, he doesn't.
No, you're part of this now. Stay right there. I gotta check something out here. So it's more like a small cell is how you're using it there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, prison, you're not the prison, you're the company that supports the prison, right? So how does...
We have a customer
You,
that does X-rays and MRIs.
Yep.
at the prison, got it. So you got the medical imaging going on at the prison. So
Now, which is typically medical imaging, which we are currently doing for hospitals right now, who had coverage issues and trying to do this, by the way. So that use case scenario for hospitals leveraging 5G capabilities already exists, but you're trying to solve the coverage problem first and foremost, right? So, and then once you solve the coverage problem, then it's really, if I solve it from a regular 4G LTE, the extending of that network, is there 5G capability, right? And again, the same answer holds true. You can have your own private 5G capabilities as well to augment, to complement, and integrate into the macro network as well.
So, but
If you look at prisons,
Yeah.
for security reasons, they're always located miles.
Oh, yes.
yes.
No, I understand.
Well, almost. We could have a conversation about Huawei.
Yeah.
Here's the question. You in effect are a systems integrator in this function, right?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Wally.
Yes, we're a systems.
Yeah, no, you got it.
You got it. You're on.
You got it. You're on. You're on.
Yeah, we're a systems integrator.
Okay, so now they've got a customer for prison. So the authority having jurisdiction's the prison. Okay. They've got a customer who's servicing the prison. As the SI, are they
They're not
channel
first.
for you? Are they a partner to you? How are you managing?
They're more of a channel by which to create the opportunity, because ultimately the prison is the authority
Right.
that would be approved to access the first responder portion of Band 14
Right.
network.
And it's more than likely that the medical imaging of it in and of itself is not the most important priority that there's.
It may not be.
Yes, there.
But all I'm trying to make a distinction is that 5G really is more of the enabler of the heavy data file transfers. That's all I'm saying.
We get that.
Yeah.
The issue is there's very little cellular available.
Right. And we can help determine that if the FirstNet extension covers that area. So
And
just,
then the second question you just answered was, I was going to ask, it appears it's only sort of government or large enterprises that can get authorization.
it can be a small enterprise as long as they're considered part of the infrastructure aspects. There's certain, you could be a small utility, right, and you're approved, right?
Yeah.
So there's an
can't-
approval process and an exception process, so we can determine that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to burn up everybody
Yeah,
else.
no. But the issue is, are you enabling channel to go out and sell for you on the FirstNet, or does it have to have some sort of structure in order to have that channel?
There's normally structure. You're probably getting to the shallow end of the pool from a channel perspective of what exactly the channel can do, because I don't work inside the channel organization.
Okay.
So it's something that I think that we're normally selling direct. There isn't another entity outside of AT&T that's legally allowed to sell FirstNet capabilities.
Okay.
Okay?
I appreciate
Having
it.
said
Thank you
that,
very much.
okay.
Yeah, thank you for your
But-
question.
Yeah, no, that's great because that's a big. We both know utilities can be incredibly small, like 8 to 10 people.
That's right.
So I mean, it's not unusual for the center of
right.
the country to have those kind of places.
Right, and that utility can literally walk into an AT&T store, official store, right, and get literally signed up
Right.
through the retail, right? So
Right.
we've enabled the retail channel, right, to do so, but it's normally the corporate
Yeah, so
stores, and
this-
there's about 2,300 AT&T corporate stores
Yeah.
nationwide.
So the size doesn't matter. It is a question of whether or not they can prove that they are an authority.
If
having
they're a
jurisdiction.
utility, they're typically in,
Good.
like Flynn.
Mallie, I want to thank you for your time. This has been great.
Oh, well, good. Thank you,
We're
Carl.
good. Is there a last statement you want to make? You want to tell we haven't told people what's the website for FirstNet. You want to tell people how?
I I think you just Google FirstNet, and then you're going to get it. But I don't want to.
Well, there's the FirstNet that's on the AT&T, and then there's the FirstNet equipment site, and then there's the authority site, right?
I wouldn't say I know this off the top of my head.
Yes. But
Okay.
there are 3 FirstNet websites. That's the important thing for you to know. There's the equipment part.
Yes.
There's the FirstNet AT&T part.
Yes.
And then there's the authority that the association.
The FirstNet authority. Yep.
Yeah. Are they going to have their own convention? Do I have to worry that I've got more competition? Don't answer that question.
Is it competition? Well, why can't you do it? You do everything else. I mean, SD-WAN, it's everything.
Tell them come on down.
I mean, what an empire you've built here with these TMC guys, people.
It's all Rich and the team down there. So
Okay.
it's been great.
All right, Carl. Well, this has been fun, and you can talk to me after the stage.